40,000 years ago, a human being sat in the dark, surrounded by ice, with no fire matches, no fitted jacket, no heated walls. Outside, the temperature dropped low enough to kill an unprotected body in under an hour. And yet, that person survived the night, then survived the winter, then survived enough winters to raise children who did the same. How? We like to imagine our ancestors as fragile, huddled, barely hanging on. But if that were true, you wouldn't be here reading this. Something about the way early humans thought, moved, and cooperated turned brutal winters into something survivable. And some of the answers scientists have found are stranger than you'd expect. Here's the first question worth sitting with. Humans are tropical animals. Our bodies evolved in warm African climates. We don't have thick fur. We don't hibernate. We don't store fat like seals. By every biological measure, we should not have been able to live through an Ice Age winter. So, what changed? Let's start with the obvious answer, because it's not as simple as it sounds. Fire. Archaeologists have found controlled fire use dating back at least 1 million years. But
here's the twist. Fire alone doesn't explain winter survival. A fire keeps you warm in one spot. It doesn't help you hunt in a blizzard, or cross a frozen river, or sleep for 8 hours when the temperature keeps dropping. Fire was necessary, but it wasn't enough. So, what was the missing piece? This is where things get strange. A 2016 study published in the journal Science examined ancient human remains in Siberia in a region called Sunghir, dated to around 34,000 years ago. Researchers found bodies buried with thousands of carefully carved ivory beads sewn onto clothing. Not fur wraps thrown over shoulders, tailored clothing, fitted sleeves, fitted leggings. This wasn't decoration. This was engineering. Ian Gilligan, an archaeologist who has spent years studying prehistoric clothing, argues that the invention of sewn, fitted garments was one of the most important survival technologies in human history, arguably as important as fire itself, because loose fur draped over a body lets cold air circulate underneath it. Fitted clothing traps a layer of warm air against the skin. That difference sounds small. It isn't. It's the difference between surviving a night at -20 degrees and freezing to death in your sleep. But here's where it gets even more interesting. To sew fitted clothing, you need something modern humans take completely for granted: the needle. Bone needles with tiny eye holes, some smaller than 2 millimeters wide, have been found at sites across Europe and Siberia dating back over 40,000 years. Think about what that means. Someone sat in the freezing dark, carving a hole smaller than a grain of rice into a sliver of bone, using nothing but stone tools and patience. That single invention may have allowed humans to migrate into some of the coldest environments on Earth. So clothing solved one problem, but it created another question. Where did the materials come from? This is where evolution and psychology start working together in a way scientists didn't fully appreciate until recently. Surviving winter wasn't just a physical challenge, it was a cognitive one. Early humans had to plan months in advance. They had to predict a season that hadn't happened yet. That kind of forward thinking, called episodic foresight, is something few animals can do at all. A landmark study from the Max Planck Institute found that this ability to mentally simulate a future scenario, imagine hunger you don't yet feel, cold you haven't yet experienced, appears to be a defining trait separating human cognition from that of our closest primate relatives. In other words, winter may have been one of the forces that shaped human intelligence itself. Think about that for a second. The season designed to kill you might be part of the reason your brain became this powerful. But surviving winter wasn't just about food storage or clothing. There's a third factor, and it's the one most documentaries skip entirely: other people. Anthropologist Polly Wiessner spent decades studying hunter-gatherer groups like the Juhansi and the Kalahari. Her research revealed something counterintuitive. During harsh seasons, storytelling around the fire wasn't entertainment, it was social glue. Shared stories reinforced trust, cooperation, and group bonds precisely when survival depended on people not turning on each other out of scarcity and fear. That's the real mystery hiding underneath all of this. Winter wasn't only a physical test, it was a psychological one. Cold, darkness, and isolation put immense pressure on the mind. Groups that maintained trust, patience, and cooperation outlived groups that didn't, regardless of how strong or well-fed any single individual was. Then scientists discovered something unexpected while studying Neanderthal remains in cold European climates. Despite thicker bodies, greater muscle mass, and a physiology seemingly better adapted to cold than ours, Neanderthals eventually vanished, while lighter-framed Homo sapiens spread across the same frozen landscapes and thrived. Researchers increasingly believe the difference wasn't strength, it was flexibility. Homo sapiens built wider social networks, traded resources across greater distances, and adapted behavior faster when conditions changed. In other words, we didn't out-muscle winter, we out-thought it. That's when everything starts to look different. Fire kept bodies from freezing. Needles created insulation nature never gave us. Foresight let us prepare for a threat before it arrived. And cooperation kept groups from collapsing under pressure. None of these alone would have been enough. Together, they turned an impossible season into something survivable, then something masterable. So here's the real question to leave you with. We often think of intelligence, empathy, and cooperation as things that make us civilized, as if they're separate from raw survival. But maybe it's the opposite. Maybe the cold didn't just test our ancestors. Maybe it built us. Every time you put on a jacket without thinking twice, you're using a 40,000-year-old solution to a problem that once decided who lived and who didn't. And maybe the real story of ancient winter isn't about how humans survived the cold. It's about how the cold quietly created the kind of mind capable of surviving anything.